is my best kind of show notes because we didn't touch one of them, not even one of them. I'm not sure which one is Paul Rudd and which one is Lane Green.
Final card here is the ultimate outcome.
Today is Take Your Dog to Work Day.
Oh, like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Without further ado, his debut.
Sweet Caroline.
Everybody say hello to Sammy. Is that not good?
I'm just pausing so that you just are at the front of your screen.
I'm so enormously flattered.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of this.
No, this is agape. This is love.
I really enjoyed this. You did do your homework. You asked great questions.
I'm flattered. Thank you. You just made my day.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
How did I do that? You're insane.
Well, welcome everybody to Corona TV. It is Tuesday. It is December 1st. Can you believe it? Can you believe it is December already? And that means just one more month. We have to endure one more month of 2020, and then we can close the book on it. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, and welcome in 2021. But right now, I just get to welcome you today, and also, of course, my guest who I will talk to you about shortly. Let's start off with birthdays. For some reason, my LinkedIn birthdays are not cooperating. I can't see who's turning anything on LinkedIn. So just a few people on Facebook to wish you guys happy birthday. And while you're in quarantine or self-isolation or lockdown, hopefully you keep your spirits up. That is the whole point of these birthday messages. Today is also 12 noon, so it is the afternoon here on the East Coast. It is 5 o'clock somewhere. Actually, it's 5 o'clock in the UK, where my guest is. And it's 9 in the morning on the West Coast. So whether you're having your oatmeal in LA, whether you're having soup and salad on the East Coast, or having a pint in the UK, this is the new time for Corona TV. And you know, I'm welcoming someone who actually is in the UK, so I'm not sure if he'll be having a pint, but James Lubbock will be coming onto the show shortly. Ford Sachs tomorrow, Harry Cohen and the heliotropic effect on Thursday, and then finally the first of our Friday community shows, and to my guest and to his story. My guest, of course, is James Lubbock, author of Breaking Dad. Absolutely brilliant title, a brilliant name for a book, and just incredible story. And you'll hear from him shortly. But first, our soliloquy. And our soliloquy today is titled Mirrors. So let me ask you a question. How well do we really know anyone? Many of us go through our lives with a series of presumptions, assumptions, perceptions, and beliefs that ultimately form a convenient picture of the people we know, or at least think we know. At the most superficial level, we have celebrities who themselves are slaves to business managers, agents, and publicists who craft an image that oftentimes is nothing like the people they actually are. Instead, they're groomed to be an idealistic mirage that pleases consumerist nation. Then we have social media, which has given us a series and a sequence of mirrors that together with smoke or filters help distort, pervert, and confuse reality from a carefully constructed version of said reality. Seems like everyone on Facebook lives the life, right? Well-adjusted, functional families that seem to be on perpetual vacation. If only that were the case. But I want to focus on the relationships we have so much closer to home, our business relationships, our personal relationships, or in the case of my guest today, the very relationship between a father and a son. So my question to you today is twofold or two-part. How well do you really know the people in your life? And moreover, how well do they really know you? Do you exist in a world that is characterized by walls, barriers, and impediments that create distance between you and your relationships? Or have you taken the time to tear down those walls, to expose the real you, warts and all, with flaws, fears, and exposed nerves on view for everyone and sundry? I can tell you that my Corona TV experience has been a liberating one. Time after time, I've had a chance to get to know people in my life that I realize after the fact I hardly knew at all. I'd like to put that on me. I'd like to blame myself for being too self-absorbed or just plain lazy, for not taking the time to really get to know them over the years. And finally, there is me. So how well do you really know me? Over the course of the past 8 months, do you feel like you've discovered the real me? Has your perception changed of me like along the way? I wish I could tell you I know who the real me is, but I can't because it's changing all the time. I'm a work in progress, and that's a good thing, I suppose. Well, now we get to find out someone else. We get to find out about the real James Lubbock. And let me give you a little introduction to James. James Lubbock was born and raised in northwest London, England. When he finished school, he followed his passion by studying film and TV production at uni. He began his career first as a programmer, then found his way into digital marketing. In the mid-90s, he discovered social media and began working for some of the first generation London social media agencies. He now works in the software industry consulting business on social media platforms and technology. In his spare time, he's an avid, I can't really say that word, so let's just go with Guna supporter, keen amateur astronomer, enjoys running half marathons to stay fit, and has recently published a book called Breaking Dad about a particularly interesting and tumultuous period in his life. Please join me in welcoming my guest today, Mr. James Lubbock. James,
hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So James, I mean, there's so much to tell and so much to talk about, but the fact remains that we actually have a pretty strong connection to one another, which we can maybe go into later. But I think the interesting thing is it's the first time we're connecting quite like this, which is just amazing.
Yeah, it is rather strange. I think you mentioned the word surreal. And, you know, perhaps it's a combination of the book that came out and also the show that you've created that's brought us together. So it's quite a happy combination of two very positive things that have come out recently.
You know, it's so funny because, you know, I think to myself, this was so easy for me to just bring you on for many reasons, for the fact that you're fascinating, for the reason that you have an incredible story to tell. But I think to myself, you know, it's almost like Corona TV is an excuse for me to reach out to people that I think to myself, why didn't I reach out to you before? Why didn't we have a relationship? You know, turns out we probably have more in common than we think, except of course for the teams we support.
Yeah. Hopefully that's the last time we mention the football. Yeah, Arsenal and Tottenham are deadly rivals in the world of football or soccer. But I mean, usually it's sad circumstances that you reconnect with people, whether it's you know, funerals or things like that. So I'm glad that we're doing it under relatively happy circumstances, at least.
Yes, I would agree. And just before we get into the book, David Libby, yes, this is the new time, 12 noon every single day, Eastern Standard Time. Todd Van Hoosier says 2021 can't come soon enough. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're going to talk about that, I guess. I mean, we're going to talk about it. James, I know you have some very strong thoughts about COVID and about 2020, you know, trying to see the silver lining and all of it. And maybe we'll get to that shortly. And Tom Morris, one of our regulars on the show, James, Tom was a guest on the show, and now he won't leave me alone. So this is what happens with Corona TV. You become part of the furniture. Happy 46th anniversary to you, Tom. And it is a happy day. I mean, I'm assuming that he's not being sarcastic. So happy day to you. But James, you know, it's funny. We normally talk about fun facts, right? My guests. I say, fun facts. Here's some interesting things about you. And it turns out that your life is a bit of a fun fact, shall we say. It's not something that I could, I looked at some of the things about you and I'm like, yeah, I can't talk about his Movember moustache or even his half marathons. Ultimately, your life is the most interesting story. And it begins with the fact that there was a show on AMC called Breaking Bad, but it turns out that actually your entire life followed the story. And that might be maybe a more realistic depiction of iteration one of the story and how eventually it becomes that story. Let's go back to the beginning and let's hear your story as told by the only person that can tell your story, which is yourself. And when I say tell your story, let's go back to your childhood and let's go back to your upbringing, your life, your relationship with your parents, and then we'll obviously segue into the next phase.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the most remarkable thing about that phase of my life was that it was unremarkable in the sense that it was a very secure, normal, stable childhood. You know, I was very happy. I was an only child, and probably got spoiled a bit as a result. We went on lots of family holidays together. I loved spending time with both my mum and my dad. That's my first day at school. I still remember that. It was a rather scary day, still imprinted on my mind. And, you know, part of the traveling was going to South Africa a lot and seeing you guys and all our friends in Cape Town and in Joburg. So that's where that's where the connection is. And that's where we first got to know each other as family friends. So, you know, it was normal all the way up to university. I went to university. I had 3 great years. At that point, that's the first sort of moment where my parents separated, and it was a very, very amicable separation. I wouldn't say it was traumatic for me at all. I was actually happy for them because they seemed happy within themselves and they stayed very friendly with each other. They even still celebrated their wedding anniversary. My dad used to quip, "It's the best year ever, Marilyn," when they celebrated it after their separation. And that was it, really. So there was no suggestion that anything untoward was going to happen. Everything was very normal, very middle class, and I was a very lucky kid in terms of my childhood, in terms of how I was brought up, I would say.
You know, James, one of the most interesting things with Lisa Cohn on the show, and we found out about her experience, her childhood experience, maybe the opposite of yours. Hers began in an unusual fashion, being part of the Moonies cult. Is we spoke about this idea of what is normal anyway, you know, and she spoke about, well, this was normal for me, so it was my normal. And it was kind of interesting how you talk about a normal childhood, a normal upbringing, certainly based on the word norm, which fits into normal, right? The idea of as society would dictate in terms of, you know, that included also the person, you know, that you chose to love, the gender of that person. That was considered to be abnormal, not even, you know, years or even a decade or two before. I think I was reading one of the articles that, well, I won't preempt it, but the legalization of even the concept of being gay or homosexuality, that is a pretty recent thing, even in the UK. So talk a little bit about at that point, and let's also just at that point put a marker in the fact. By the way, here is my mom. You can say hello to her. She is watching. So there you go, all the way from South Africa. Well, my mom is a coin dealer, and your dad was a coin dealer, and there's a photo of him in an unusually messy office or busy office. I hadn't seen that photo before. So now let me turn it back to you and talk about at that moment about the first change. You know, obviously your parents separate, they get divorced. Talk a little bit about the path that they pursued at that point.
Yeah, so it happened at uni when they separated. In fact, they never actually got divorced. It was just a separation. So very, very amicable. And then I went traveling. I came back, started my career. And then in sort of the mid-noughties, my dad said, you know, I want to take you out for dinner. There's something I need to tell you. So I hate drama. I hate surprises, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. So we sat down and we had dinner. And eventually, during the main meal, I got him to spurt it out. And he told me that he was gay. And I was completely shocked. I thought it was either a love child or he had a terminal illness. So actually, because of the latter, I was relieved. Was my first emotion, really. Surprise, shock, a bit of amusement. I was proud of him in a way that he had the courage finally to come out, because obviously when he grew up, it was illegal. It was only made legal in the 60s in the UK. So, yeah, really, really surprised. Obviously, he was my dad. I never saw him in that way at all, but I told him, you're still my dad, and we carry on, you know, and enjoy your new life, and just, I suppose, in a sort of a slightly awkward, embarrassing way, stay safe. It was probably the wrong way around there. And then 2 weeks later, Mum said, let's go out for dinner, presumably to talk about that. And we sat down, and she then told me that, you know, she was living with a good friend of hers, but in fact, it wasn't just friendship. She was in a relationship with that lady, and she was also gay. So within the space of 2 weeks, both parents had come out. You can imagine that was a bit of a surprise on both fronts there.
Now, you wrote, I think, an op-ed article, and you said something like really poignant. You said, when both my parents came out as gay, I finally felt like I understood them. And I, as I read that, I thought to myself, I wonder how many of us don't understand their parents, think they understand their parents, try to create understanding with their parents. So talk a little bit about this. Was the sense you felt, was it liberation? Was it relief? What made you understand them now compared to then?
I think when they were finally, you know, when you cover that important part of yourself up, when you suddenly release that, you can be more yourself. And, you know, I saw them in a different light, and they were both happier in many ways, actually. This weight off their shoulders were gone. And I could, certainly with my dad, I know that he was nervous about telling me that sort of relief was gone. And I felt closer to them. I felt I could talk, you know, they could talk to me about anything now, and I could really talk to them about anything. But I think that point of, you know, what do you really know your parents is a really interesting one, an important one. I think you had a guest on your show recently that released a book, 23 Questions to Ask Your Mum and Dad.
That's right.
I mean, that is, and then completely coincidentally, I was talking to one of my best friends a few days ago, and he said he started to interview his mum to get to know her a bit better, because he felt like he was just having the same conversation with her and it wasn't that exciting, and let's actually find out about her history. And he said he's found out all this stuff. So I think one of the lessons is, you know, take that opportunity to really get to know your parents before it's too late.
Yeah, Leslie is giving Jan a little a tip to that. You're going to see a lot of what I would call authentic promotion, because Jan is also part of this Corona TV family and has become a regular here. And in many respects, Corona TV was a part of his journey, James, where he was lying in bed at night and couldn't sleep. You know, and we've been together through Corona TV every day, and he started thinking about all these questions. But to your point, at least, you know, and I wouldn't even say at least, you know, but certainly with your dad. But unfortunately, you know, tragedy really did strike with your mom, or at least, you know, I guess tragedy is the right word to use.
Yeah, look, it's all relative, and I at least got to know her, but for a large part of my life. But yeah, I mean, another part of the story, and also in the book, and it sort of comes out of nowhere, really, both in the book and in my life, is Mum came round, you know, a few years after they'd separated. Mum was in a very strong, happy relationship with this other lady. My dad was doing his own thing, which we'll get into later. And she said, I want my girlfriend at the time to be there, and she wouldn't tell me. I thought, what now? She turned up with her partner and said to her partner, "Can you take Laura and go for a walk?" And then she sat me down and she took my hand, which felt really scary, and told me that she'd been diagnosed with terminal ovarian cancer. Not even just cancer, but terminal cancer, and that was just obviously horrific. And I don't really know how I coped with it, but she brought around half a bottle of red wine, and I said, "I think I know what the wine's for now." She's like, "Yeah, I just thought maybe it can help a little bit. You have a few glasses and take the edge off." And she left, and that was the beginning of another journey of being with her and trying to spend as much quality of time as possible with her before she sadly passed away, which was about 1.5 years after she was initially diagnosed.
Things happen in threes, they say, and we'll get to the third in a moment. But I wanted to ask you, obviously I remember your mom well. There's no doubt, and I can say this, it's not lip service, that she is so proud of you and the man that you've become, the man that you are, and also your wonderful family. I wanted to ask you, a la these 23 questions, what is one question that you wish you could ask her today?
He's putting me on the spot a bit, but I just actually it's more what I would like to. Well, okay. So one of the things that I think was in Jan Zlotnick's book was, do you know how much that I always loved you as a kid, or something like that? And that's not obvious for a son or a daughter to think about asking, because you assume that, but then you become a parent and things become more complex. And I think my mum did at times question that, because there were times when we fell out with each other. We had our usual mother-son arguments, and she wrote in her final letter to me that she hoped she was a good mother. And I wish that I could have said, "You were an amazing mother and I always loved you." So I think that is a good question. That was a question I would love to have asked her, but it just never occurred to me until very recently, really.
So now we talk about, what do they call it, the third, I don't know, the third leg, the penny dropping. I'm not even sure what the coin dropping. We go from being a coin collector or a coin dealer, I should say, to a different dealer completely. And I mean, it's a story that just doesn't seem real. It just doesn't seem. It seems as fictional as Breaking Bad, the series, as Walter White. I don't even know how to ask the first question, except to say, why don't you take us to the beginning? What happened next? Yeah,
so I mean, you could say that Dad's new life of exploring the gay scene. He was into cups of tea and opera and classical music. He hated loud noise. He hated smoke. He disagreed with any drug taking. So then he started getting into a young group of friends. He started going clubbing, and yes, he started experimenting with drugs. And he started off on the soft drugs and got into the harder drugs. And I was witnessing this, and initially it was amusing as a son to talk to him about it, because I've in the past, yes, I've dabbled here and there, so we had something else to relate to and talk about. But then I noticed when I went around to his flat one day that he had on a chair like a pile of coke, and that was a shock. I said, "What do you do with all that sort of stuff? You don't need all of that." And he said, "Look, it's cheaper if I buy a large quantity. I give some to my friends, and it just works out." So I said, "Well, you give them or do you sell them?" "I give them, nothing like that, etc., etc." Gave him the benefit of the doubt, because again, beforehand, he's never done anything silly. He's never broken the law. It would never even be in his universe. To cut a sort of a long story short, I went back to his flat after that, and increasingly every time I went back, there seems to be more and more people milling around, people I didn't know. And then one day I noticed the door to his office. You see a picture of him in his coin shop there. Well, the desk was there, but instead of the coins on there and the papers, there was a scale and bags of drugs and money and all sorts of things. And at that point, I realized that he was dealing drugs, and I couldn't quite comprehend it. It was the bottom had fallen through my world once again, you know, first with my mum, now with this. And I just sort of, it's difficult to take, right? So that was how I found out. And it just got bigger from there, really.
And so, you know, we're going to fast forward through the next part. But from what I understand, he became, I mean, it sounds fantastical. He became Britain's most wanted crystal meth dealer. And I mean, how does that happen, to knowing now that your father is wanted, and obviously that moves into the fact where he is incarcerated? It just seems like, you know, like the extreme story just gets crazier and crazier.
Well, you sort of bury your head in the sand when this is going on, and you think, I've got absolutely no experience of this. I've got nothing to compare it with. So is this a big deal, or is it just small time? You know, are the police aware? Do they care? I knew that he was becoming more busy, and I knew that he was applying his principles of doing business when he was a coin dealer. And by the way, and I know it sounds counterintuitive, but he was one of the most respected coin dealers in the business, I would say, and from what I've heard from his colleagues, you know, people trusted him. He was very straight up. He made sure he did everything properly and didn't try and rip anyone off. And he applied those principles to the drug dealing. So you've got this drug dealer who you feel safe with, and you know you can trust. And of course, that creates a huge amount of success. So yeah, I just hoped that he would see sense and it would turn around, and obviously not. And in the end, what happened was they eventually raided his flat, and it was the actual what the police said was it was the biggest haul of crystal meth at that time in London. And this is London, one of the biggest cities in the world. So, you know, he didn't do things by halves, let's say. He did well in his coin business, and unfortunately he also did well in his drug dealing as well.
And James, how old were you at the time when he was eventually arrested?
Well, it was 2009. So yeah, I was in so my early 30s, my late 20s, early 30s.
So clearly independent, living your life, and now he goes away. He goes to prison. At that point, do you have a relationship with him? Or, I mean, I just can imagine the emotions going through you at that point.
Yeah, look, I mean, I was incredibly angry at him. I had a certain level of contempt at that point, as you can understand. We'd lost mum. So thankfully, she passed away before she became aware of the drug dealing. So she didn't have to sort of go through that. So, yeah, I mean, look, I tried to maintain a relationship with him, even through the darkest period, because I didn't know how much longer I had left with him. I thought if he'd carried on taking the crystal meth, is what he was addicted to, he would have been dead within 6 months if he hadn't been arrested. It was killing him anyway. So I just thought, I just need to try and be with him. He's the only one I've got now. All his other friends had either deserted him or just, you know, didn't know what was going on. So that's what I did. When he eventually did get arrested, I got the phone call from a friend of his to tell me. I was very, very shocked to hear it, but again, relieved, because I thought the phone call was to tell me that he'd been found dead in his flat. That wouldn't have surprised me. And then that night, I got a call from him from the prison. It was the first time he sounded sober for maybe 3 years. And he was very emotional, but it was him. It was almost like Dad was back. And he said he was sorry and that he loved me, and that was it. And it was a relief just to hear him back, and essentially the prison saved his life. So again, it depends how you look at it, but actually it was a positive thing that he was arrested in the end.
And it feels almost like a little. I'm going to create a made up word, Shawshankian, shall we say? That while he was in prison, not only did he change, but he also changed other people's lives, and he almost became that father figure, the safety that you felt around him, and the safety that he brought to you. He brought to others as well, and he started actually helping people.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the many paradoxes in the story. He found, not only did he survive in prison, he thrived in prison. And this is the bit that's not in the book, because the book is from my point of view, and I'd love to do another book potentially with him, talking about his own prison experiences. You know, he was a frail, small, old Jewish man, really. Well, old, he would have a go at me for saying that. You know, I was scared for him. He was going to be bullied. He was going to be ripped to pieces there. But actually, he found a really important role. There were lots of people there, kids, you know, a lot of people in prison. You realize they're just normal people that have made very bad decisions. And he was there as a father figure, as you say. He did counseling for some of them. He became a football coach. He taught English. And it was almost like a rebirth for him. And it gave me faith in the British prison system. I couldn't believe it, but yeah, it was working for him.
His team was undefeated, I think, when he started coaching them. So you know, I mean, it's very hard to resist the urge to say maybe he should be coaching Arsenal Football Club, but I promise you, the references to Arsenal, there will only be another 5 to 10 left in this interview. But it's how long was he incarcerated for, James?
Well, he was in prison for 4 years. He was given an 8-year sentence, which is a pretty long sentence, even despite, you know, what he was doing. But when you plead guilty, you serve half and you're on parole for the other half. But the 4 years, I mean, it just feels like I can't believe it happened, really. I think it's the same for him. But 4 years is 4 years, and he learned a lot about himself, and yeah, he made a difference, I think. So it was a positive 4 years for him.
Now you know, there are a lot of silver linings. I mean, we found out about the silver lining through this period, and how, as you say, ironically, really not the rehabilitation was real. And substantial, not just in his life, but how he could impact others. There's a really nice, not nice, it's very uplifting that you have a relationship with him, and that he can be a grandfather to your kids, that you don't have to now write a book and say, another book and say, these are the questions I wish I'd been able to ask him. I haven't spoken to him in years, and I have to say that I do. At times, I didn't even know what I would say to him if I did see him again. You know, Tom says, "What has James's dad been doing since prison?" I think we should ask him. Should we ask him?
Let's do it.
Let's ask him, Mr. Richard Lubbock. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
How you listen, for a man who was born and blessed with the gift of the gab, there is a reason why you became a successful drug dealer. It's because you had a way with words. You still have a way with words.
I think it, strangely enough, it actually started important, sort of on a serious level, in South Africa. Because I made friends with a group of guys and girls, a mixed group, but more guys than girls. And they took me to a club one night, and they gave me a pill. I think it wasn't a club; it was an outdoor thing. And he gave me a pill, but I trusted them, and I said, "What's this?" He said, "Don't worry, just take it; you'll be fine." And to cut a very long story short, when it finally kicked in, which I didn't think it was going to, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I thought I was going to die. I just lay on the grass and did nothing because I was scared. And then the guy came up to me, a friend of mine, said, "Come on, get up, you'll be fine." And he was right. And I danced like crazy for the rest of the night. And I thought, well, this is amazing. And I'm not trying to advertise the good in these things. I'm just saying it from a personal perspective, but I would not recommend it, because whatever good you feel is way overtaken by taking it far further and then feeling terrible.
And look, we were joking in the green room, or maybe I should call it the orange room. I was like, you realize that the shirt that you've chosen to wear might give people the indication that you're still locked up, but you aren't locked up. And thank you for not changing, and thank you for not taking a Sharpie and putting arrows on your shirt. But people are saying, congratulations on the good you did for people in prison, Dad of James, also known as Richard. And David says he loves Corona TV because you never know who is just gonna pop in. But let me ask you the question that Tom asked, Richard, which is, what have you been doing since prison?
Well, I listen to a lot of music, and I don't have a particular career planned, because I just don't know what, it would be very difficult. I would love to get more involved in opera, for instance, but it's very, especially as there's no opera now, or nothing like that. And anyway, the days of me going was when the really good top stars were on, and they're just not there anymore. It's a bit frustrating, but I'm not saying there aren't any. I just maybe don't know them. But opera was my great love, so I listened to an awful lot of music. But yes, you're right. What am I doing? And apart from trying to sort out all the paperwork, which is all over the floor at the moment, I need to get my life sorted out still, because it's still all in disarray.
Well, I feel like you've started to sort it out. I'm going to give you a better backdrop. You might prefer this backdrop. Let's just assume it's the Emirates, but it isn't at the moment. So just don't be distracted by this glorious stadium that I think seats 6 people more than yours does. As I said, do not just look in my eyes. You're going to be fine. Richard, you are doing good. You have done good. You did good while you were locked up. You're doing good by being on a show and talking about this. You too, James. Not enough people talk. Not enough people are able to talk. People live lives where they bottle up, they suppress, they hide, they deny. One of the things I saw in the article, in one of the articles, is that, and this article was written in 2019, that nearly half of the LGBTQ or plus millennials have not come out yet. So it's funny. It's funny who provides inspiration in this world, and it's interesting who can be inspired by people that might surprise you. I think you've begun that path or that process.
I mean, one thing I would say is that I think something you didn't mention is obviously the relationship you've built with your 2 granddaughters. So you've been spending a lot of time with them and buying them lots of presents and spoiling them, which I guess one would expect. But just to your point, Joseph, I mean, I think one thing that's come out of this is the people that have read the book and the people that have realized that I've sort of let it all out, they themselves have been shared quite a lot of personal things. People that I might not know that well, work colleagues and, just people that I've met, they feel that they can share because I've shared. And I think and I come from my career is social media. I think one of the most unhealthy things about social is that people put forward their fake version of themselves, the best possible version. It's completely unrealistic.
Right.
And unfortunately, even though we know as adults that it's not real, when you scroll through that feed, something in you, some subconscious little voice is saying, oh, everyone's having a good life and they're perfect and it's not going well for me. And I think it's super unhealthy. And sometimes I wish that people would try, and it's easier said than done, just be a bit more honest and open on social. When you do that, you tend to get more engagement because people can actually relate to that more. So I think hopefully the book is a nice antidote to some of the sort of the fake versions of people's lives that are being put out there at the moment.
And by the way, I'm if you look in the comments, you will see a link to purchase this book on Amazon, and I certainly do recommend that you purchase it. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that there is something tremendously brave about being able to do it, but I would imagine it's also quite cathartic and liberating to be able to share with other people.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the process was, I wanted to write the book. I found a way to write it. I thought it was a very slim chance to be published. And then we got the publishing deal. And a couple of weeks before it went out, I decided to reread the book. And I can't believe this is all going out. I'd forgotten all the personal stuff that I put in. I mean, some of it's pretty personal. And I was at work at the time and still in the same company, actually. And they were very, very supportive, which really meant a lot. And I think there's also recognition that in the modern day and age, we're not robots, and we do have these amazing histories, and it's not perfect, and there are different colors to it, and that needs to be accepted in a lot of areas. But yeah, I mean, look, I think the other interesting thing that also came out of this was the media. It was a huge media reaction when the book came out. We were on lots of radio shows, me and Dad together, and that was a lovely experience to be together. And I learned a lot about him just through the interviews. But what they were really interested in, it wasn't so much the drug dealing and the crime side. It was actually the sexuality and the gay parents, and that's where a lot of the questions came, and a lot of the articles were written. And just a final point, just to focus on that, was that a year later, a very famous, very well-known TV personality in the UK, a guy called Philip Schofield, who was married and with kids, came out and announced that he was gay himself. It was headlines, and within an hour of him announcing, all the radio stations got back in touch with me and asked me to be on the show, because apparently I'm the one that knows about what it's like to have parents that come out. So there's definitely this fascination, and for me, I would love it if there wasn't a fascination anymore and it wasn't big news. It was more accepted and more normal that there is this sort of mixture, and people are different sexualities. It's just sad, as you showed in that statistic, that so many people just haven't come out yet.
And then there's one more part to it, which is almost a ridiculous thing to have to even say, is when people see you and they see married with kids, a good job, that's almost reassuring to people. Oh, look how he turned out. But the reality is, I think that is also a fool's errand to be able to say, look, there's a happy ending, because this isn't Hollywood. This isn't about fairy tales. This is about life. It's about relationships, and how many people are normal with normal marriages and normal kids and don't have a relationship and are in fact living a lie. That's why I guess people have been so fascinated, is your ability to say, this is who we are, this is who I am. And we're not only are we getting on with it, but we're actually secure enough to share it with others. It's a pretty big deal. I'm guessing that's why they were so fascinated.
I think so. I think also it's just a story that I still can't quite believe. And I knew that this story hadn't been told yet. And I felt that if I didn't tell it myself, someone else at some point is going to come along with a similar story. And I'd be like, well, why didn't I tell my version of the story? So there was that feeling that, yes, I was like, is this really interesting, or am I just biased here? But every time I told them, whether it was a friend or someone I just met, their jaws dropped open. So I knew that I had to try. And sure enough, the reaction was a big one. And here we are.
Richard, I haven't forgotten about you. I want to ask you guys some questions together, which is, James earlier said that he learned a lot about you through this process. What did you learn about yourself going through this whole process, and what did you learn about James?
Well, to take James first, I mean, James has incredibly been always James. I mean, no matter what happened, he dealt with it. It's one of those really amazing things that he was able to, and I would put it down in part to the relationship he had both with my late wife and myself, because we always kept him in touch. We wouldn't sort of cast him aside in any situation. That we were when we were ready to discuss it, we would discuss it. So he knows he was never left out, and I think that helped. What I've excuse me, what I've learned about myself is that I was astonished at myself in prison. I mean, of all places, me in prison. I mean, it could never have been. And the strangest thing is, and I think about it every day, is how normal I became. I mean, I really did not feel that gay at all in prison. I suppose I felt like I didn't dare to, but at the same time, I enjoyed the atmosphere. I was looking for all the terrible things that go on in prison. I didn't see much. There was certainly no murders or anything like that because they put me into a lesser grade prison. I was never in a grade 1, if you call it, prison where all the murderers are and all the the real thugs are. So I never saw that really. There were 1 or 2 guys who were a bit, more difficult than others, but I used to get into a crowd every time, and they used to move you into different prisons. So I think I was in 3 for about a year or so each, and then another couple here and there. But I got into a great crowd every time. How? I don't know. I don't know how it happened. And we really had some good friendships. And the most amazing thing was the last big one that I was at. They had big football fields and things, and the guy who was the best player probably out of the 600 prisoners in there was in my wing. And I said to him, "Blimey, you're really a great player." And he said, "Thanks." And then we became really good friends. And by the end of the week, the first week of our friendship, he's calling me Dad. And then he suddenly said to me, "Why don't you give us," because he knew I was involved with psychology and psycho therapy, etc. So he said, "Why don't you come and give us a talk?" I said, "Okay, I'll do that. I'll give the team a talk." Anyway, from that moment on, they listened. The key to this is not me so much as what they did, which was that they were able to listen, and they took it from there. And I didn't need to really say much after that. And they never lost another game. In fact, their last match, they won 11-3, I think. It was wonderful to see.
And at least half, from what I understand, at least half of the team were once professional footballers playing for Arsenal, if that's correct. Did I read the press release correctly?
If that were true, they'd never have won 11-3 at the end.
There you go. That's the Richard I was waiting for. Richard, you've very kindly, first of all, kudos to you and your tech support, i.e. James, for figuring out StreamYard streaming, and you're going to be joining us in the Zoom after show. So thank you for that. Normally we have something called a Corona question. I'd like to ask you both this Corona question, because to have a father and son answer it, I think might be interesting, and it depends who goes first, depending on what you say, which could be interesting and awkward. I'm just kidding. But this is the question. Which person, living or dead, has inspired you the most in your personal or professional life? It's a question this week I asked all my guests. I'm going to let James determine who goes first.
You go first, Dad.
It's very easy. When I was about 19, I think it was, back in 1966, I got so fed up with all the feelings, the different mixture of feelings of gay and not gay and all the rest of it. And I said, I've got to sort myself out. And I asked my doctor, my local doctor, if he knew anyone who was good at psychology, etc. And he said, yes, I do actually. And he put me in touch with the most wonderful person, professionally and socially, that I'll ever meet, who his name was actually Ismond Rosen. He was from South Africa originally. And he became he was actually a very famous, I didn't realize how famous, he was a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst. And I was with him for many years. And it was him, in a way, that helped me to be able to just talk to that football team, for instance, years afterwards, and discuss what was going wrong, etc. It was him that enabled me to talk to anyone about anything, to be honest. And I'll never forget him. He died sadly back in, I think it was about 2002 or 2003. I can't remember. I should remember, but I don't want to remember. And he had a most amazing effect on me. You should look him up, Ismond Rosen. And you'll find him in most of the books of anybody well known.
And what about you, James?
I'm struggling with that one, to be honest with you. I mean, there are people that I've looked up to that have helped me. It's probably a combination. I mean, I definitely was affected by seeing how my mum dealt with her terminal illness. She just somehow raised herself to another level. You know, she didn't go, she could, people can easily go into depression when you know that there's no hope, but she retained her sense of humor and she stayed herself right up until the end. And that, I still use that as sort of a form of strength, really, to think, you know, when you're like that, you can, you know, mum can actually do that. I must have that in me as well. I think, I mean, look, I look up to, I'm going to have to mention Freddie Mercury, big Queen fan. But, you know, I think he's an interesting one because he came from a place that was completely alien and settled in northwest London. And he was a very introverted guy, funnily enough. People don't realize it. And he navigated his way through and had that self-belief. And it's that self-belief that he had that I find amazing, and became, you know, not only this star, but now an icon, really. And he lived his life to the fore. And I think living your life and making the most of every second, I think, is a really inspirational way to think of it. And so maybe those are two people, Freddie and my mum.
I love that because, you know, I'm a huge Queen fan as well. So yet another thing we have in common, except of course, and I honestly thought you were going to say Mauricio Pochettino was the guy, but whatever, you know.
I wouldn't
Richard,
Arsenal manager now, but anyway.
I mean, he might be. He better not, you know. and his assistant will be Sol Campbell. Richard, I'm gonna spend the last 5 or 6 minutes with your son, but we'll see you in the Zoom after show. I want to just it's pretty amazing to see you after all these years. A lot of memories come flooding back, and very gracious and generous of you to spend time with us today and for us to reconnect. So we'll see you in about 5 to 10 minutes. James, it's just been an absolute joy catching up with you, and I have a feeling it's not the last time that we'll see you or we'll be doing this. The final two things that I just wanted to give you, almost like a little bit lightning round, you know, to answer that quickly. But, you know, one of the things that you wanted to talk about really was appreciating your parents more. I think we've come full circle in this conversation, from the 23 questions to questions you wish you'd asked them when they were alive, to really appreciating what you have, no matter what it looks like. What's that message that you want to share in terms of how do we get closer to our parents? How can we learn from them? You know, if they aren't crystal meth dealers, I mean, some people need that, I suppose, but you didn't have, you know, most people don't have that luxury. I'm obviously kidding, but how would you respond to that?
Well, I would take inspiration from my friend that I mentioned. He just started interviewing and asking questions he'd never normally answer. Like, you know, if you're in an interview and this is how I started learning more about my dad. The interviewers on the BBC and other networks asking these questions I would never ask him, and I learned so much from that. And there's no reason why you can't do that. He's even recording the conversation, and that's posterity. That's the same thing as almost writing a book in a way, because you have that record now of your parent, and your kids would have a record of their grandparents, conversations that they would never hear. So I think, put yourself in a sad position of thinking, how would you feel if and when you do lose your parents, and what would you regret not having asked them? I refer again back to James Lubbock about the book he wrote. I thought that's quite a moving, profound thought, and important thing. It's similar to when in a sort of the hospital where people die, are there terminally, and they asked the nurses what the top 5 things those people said they regretted the most before they died. I think one of them was working too hard. And maybe another one was to do with the relationships with their family. So those are just some of my thoughts at the moment, but these thoughts evolve, and I'm really interested to hear what everyone else thinks as well.
Well, you'll meet some of them in the after show. I normally have a quote if you've watched the show, and this was your quote today, which is, you need to stop focusing on the darkness behind you. The past is the past. Nothing can change what we've done. I think it's a quote that talks to regret, or just kind of moving forward. And of course, if you didn't know who said that, it was Walter White, the other one, the other Walter White from Breaking Bad season 5, Blood Money. James, I want to this is a show about hope, positivity, and optimism. You seem to me to be the eternal optimist. No matter what life has thrown at you, you don't even bounce back. It seems like it doesn't faze you. I know that what people see on the outside is not always what you feel on the inside, but I'd love for you to leave us today with a message of hope. The positives from lockdown. What are you taking away? Even though earlier there was a comment about, can't wait to see the end of 2020. How do you look back at 2020 in terms of what it meant to you and what you think other people might want to take away?
Well, I think one of the real challenges in today's world is that life is too fast paced, and there's too much information, and you're always on, and you're getting emails all through the day. And I think lockdown, looking at the positives, and obviously there's tragedies associated with the virus and all the deaths, but sure, lockdown's given us the chance to take a step back, be a bit more contemplative of life, think about what's important, maybe indulge in one's hobbies a little bit more, and just change the pace of life. Because when you're stressed and when you're not having time to actually digest what's going on, that's very unhealthy, and you need that headspace. And I don't think I was getting it, and I think a lot of people weren't getting it. And I know people are sort of complaining a lot about stuck at home, but you know what? There are worse things about being confined to your house. You can find things that are fascinating. You can read, you can watch TV, you can anything. I mean, there's so many things. So I think, the thing I'm worried about is when it comes to the end and life does go back to normal, I do think it will go back to normal, feeling regret that I haven't made the most of the lockdown. That's what I said to my wife only today. So that's my thought, is make the most of this time, because before you know it, it will be gone and everything will go back to normal, and there'll be things that you probably miss.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think maybe that's the final message, which is it's December 1st today. You've got 1 month left in 2020 to make the most of it. If you haven't found that moment, gain that perspective, determined your priorities, if you haven't been able to align or realign, you've got 30 days or 31 days, including today, to do it, to make sure that when you do close the chapter or the book on 2020, it isn't one with regret, but at least one that is focused on moving forward. James, there is no doubt that you are doing that. You are moving forward. For those of you that want to keep connected to James, he is Lubbockian. I love that. Lubbockian on Instagram, on Twitter. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. He even has a day job, which many of us don't even have anymore. And you can find out about him and his company, his wonderful company, Coros, at Coros.com. I'm trying to think if and you've got to go and buy the book if I didn't show that as well. Breaking Dad, How My Mild-Mannered Father Became Britain's Biggest Meth Dealer. But amidst everything and throughout everything, he just remained one thing, and that was Dad. And that was fairly obvious. James, thank you so much. And we were talking about all my famous friends, none as famous as this man.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
There you go. Let's head on over to the Zoom After Show. Take care, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at CoronaTV.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.